Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order, the Agriculture Advisory Committee meeting, and pleased to see a good turnout. Okay, gentlemen, we're in session here, if you don't mind. Anyway, we don't have a large agenda today, but there's a few things I think can be discussed. Anyway, without further ado, we'll move into the meeting. Do you have any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof from anyone? I don't see any. Thank you. And could I have an approval of the agenda as presented? Councillor McHugh, Mayor Harrison, any questions about that? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now I would ask the approval of the minutes, and I know it was a little different meeting. We were lacking a body, but anyway, the approval of the minutes of March the 19th and June the 18th advisory meetings, and I'll entertain any Brian Cruz and Douglas Cruz. Cruz 1 and 2, I guess. And any errors, omissions, or questions regarding those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And public meetings, we have none. As far as I know, any public input? I don't see a big crowd out here in front of us. We'll probably have some areas where the committee here can maybe make some presentations or whatever. But welcome, Brian and Davina. Davina thought she was going to have to take over and run everything, but anyway, we told her she'd get double pay. So you just spoiled her day. Anyway, maybe Brian, you mentioned yesterday you were going to do a short presentation, and now that we're at presentations, where we stand with the ongoing official plan, and maybe any other things you might want to bring forward at this time regarding to planning and maybe agricultural use or whatever.
Yes, through Mr. Chair, thank you. Really just a quick update on the official plan. As you know, we sent our official plan update into the province back March or April of 2023. So it's been with the province for some time. We've had a couple of meetings over the last couple of months with ministry staff, and more recently, in the last couple of weeks, we received what's titled a draft decision. So basically, what the province is doing now, or the ministry is doing with official plans, is they're in order to try and streamline the end of the process, if you like. They're providing municipality with a draft decision, so they're letting us know at the staff level what modifications, if any, they want to make to our plan. Get some consensus with the city on that, and then all being well, we should get a decision. So we did receive a draft decision back 2 weeks ago. August 29th. I think basically there was 32 different modifications to the plan, which sounds like a lot, but they were all what I would classify as housekeeping edits. A lot of them were terminology changes. For anybody that's been following provincial policy changes, legislation, bills, etc. over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of changes on planning policies specifically at the province. That's come along with a lot of different kind of terminologies, different categories. So there's basically a lot of wording changes as part of the modifications, but we've been through them at the staff level. There's nothing significant in terms of anything that changes any of the policy direction or any of the designations that we are suggesting, or any of the underlying policies around topics like severances or agricultural policies within the plan. As I say, they're all very much housekeeping edits. We've reviewed them. We met with ministry staff last week. We've got one modification that we're going backwards and forwards with them on in the wording related to accessory dwelling units, and assuming we can come to an agreement on the correct wording for that. The next step would be a decision. We've confirmed with them already, with the ministry, that there's nothing within their modifications that requires an updated decision from council. As I say, they're all small modifications. If there had been something significant, a major policy change or something they disagreed with the city's position on, we would be bringing it back to council for review, but that's not the case. So while they still haven't told us exactly what the date would be for an approval, we're certainly hopeful that we should see an approval on the official plan in the coming months before the end of the year. So that was the update. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Any questions from the committee to Brian about anything that might be of your interest in that? I know there's a lot of things we got to wait and see if it's okay or not okay, I guess, but other than that, well, we'll hope it's just housekeeping stuff. And did they give you any indication about the numbers of severances? I know when we were having the public meetings, that was always a big thing. People were pushing for more. And I know the last time they kind of froze it on us and we had to go back and appeal to even get one. Do you feel there's going to be any pushback in that regard this time, or?
Through Mr. Chair, no. There's no modifications or suggested changes to the city's position on the severance policies. So if you remember, the severance policies in the draft plan were to still have the same criteria that would apply to severances. So in rural designated lands and specific lot size and a number of other technical considerations, but what we had recommended in the plan and council had adopted was that under this plan, even if you'd had a severance under the previous plan, you may be eligible for a new severance, so the date would roll on. But again, you have to make those technical considerations. So they're fine with that. I think actually over the last year and a half, what we thought was going to happen was that the province was going to require us to be more open or more liberal with severance policies, i.e. allow more severances, because that's the direction, again, if anybody was watching, that the province was going in, that every opportunity to build a new house was something that municipalities should be taking and letting happen. But what's interesting is within the last year and a half, the province seems to have gone very high on that, but now with various bills having been changed, been edited, and comments back from committees such as this and municipalities, they've pulled back on that, and now the focus is still on more housing, as we all know, but it's very much more housing within urban areas and on urban services. So that's where all the focus is, particularly in larger centres where they are adjacent to major transit facilities, that type of thing. And the pressure has been reduced or taken away from rural style development. There was a point in time since we submitted that we felt at the staff level that we were going to be asked to allow for more severances and that we were going to be required to open up rural subdivisions. None of that's happened. They've basically pulled that back. And interestingly, the timing of this decision or this draft decision, I don't think is it's just part of the process, because just a few weeks before we got the notice of draft decision, the province made their final approval of the provincial policy statement, which again is obviously their planning policies, which had been kind of out for various rounds of public consultation for the last year or so. So they approved that a few weeks ago, and then we got our decision. So again, provincial policies went all the way from very liberal, and then they seem to come back to where we were a couple of years ago. So from the perspective of development pressures in rural areas and protections around agricultural uses, particularly on prime agricultural land, there'll be no changes through the official plan, and the provincial policy is fairly steady on that. So, yep.
I guess the other thing in regards to the agricultural, and I know the mayor and I and Councillor McHugh at different presentations that we had was the allowing on agricultural designated properties where a family member wanted to. That was part of the business, and I know it's a touchy issue because if you put a house there, then it can impact the operation, especially when they move out and somebody else moves in. But with multi-family operational, I guess, capabilities of farms now, why for them to sometimes get a mortgage for a place, why it was a touchy issue, I guess we'd say, with some family members and families to allow a family member to have a so-called severance in a separate house on the piece of farmland, but it's always that possibility when it's sold to somebody else down the road, and I understand that side of it. But I know, Mr. Mayor, we had different discussions at some of the conferences in that regard to see if there was any flexibility, I guess, how you would apply that or put it into some kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, that you're right. That conversation has been had in a number of different ways with the ministry, not just by us, by other municipalities, and I think even through some of the associations as well. I still believe there's a way to do that. I still think there's a way to because it's not so much like I mentioned earlier about severances. There's your fundamental position that you start with as to whether something like a severance or a severance on an agricultural lot is allowed or not allowed. But really, it's always about the implementation. You can create the conditions around which an application would have to meet in order to work. And I believe that there are, as we presented to the ministry before, there are ways to condition a farm lot severance for succession planning for farming operations. I still believe there's a way to do that, but maintain the integrity of the agricultural land. There just doesn't seem to be a willingness of the province to look at that at this point.
It was just a question because I know we've dealt with it. Mr. Fox.
I just, hearing and listening, just had a thought that is there any way to just build, without a severance, just allow to build another house on the farm property?
Yeah, good question. Yes, there is, and that's something that, and there's a number of ways that you can do that. The our zoning, probably since amalgamation, if not before, has allowed for additional dwelling on a farm operation for farm workers, was usually the way it was termed. Since that time, more recently, there's also the ability to do an accessory dwelling unit within a property. So there are ways to do it, but as the chair mentioned, the issue almost always becomes the ability to get a mortgage to build that second home. And the mortgage companies won't do that unless it's a separate property. That always seems to be the sticking point where it falls apart. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we dealt with, I know Committee of Adjustment, we've had a couple with so-called incorporated farms with multifamily members. I'm not going to name any names, but I know we had one. They have to think about if there's ever a separation, which can happen and unexpectedly. But the other thing was, if the business went bankrupt, then if it's all part of the business, they could lose everything. They'd be out on the road. And that's the other thought. Not that the creditors couldn't come back down the road to take the house, but that was one of the other considerations I know in this one application we had that was considered and why they kind of want the separation. And as Brian said, and I know when they go to apply to get a mortgage, if the bank or wherever you get it from, they'd have to put on the whole farm, or like the farm would have to assume the debt. And so that's what creates the questionable, and I can understand it, if you're going to put money in a house, you hope you're going to live your life there and die there, I guess, and move on and pass it along. But there are some technical issues I think you have to deal with. But I know as the farms are getting bigger and they're becoming limited and incorporated, that's some of the things you have to think of. And I know in this one case, we did help them, and they got one down the road a ways. It was still but it was part and parcel of the farm. And I don't think it was recommended, as I remember, but we put it in a place that there was some residential around it, and so we were able to, we passed it and it went through. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. That's just some of the criteria we're working with. Mr. Fox and then Mr. Keating.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was my concern was if you built that house as a son, say, or something like this, and someplace down the road they either didn't want to farm any longer or whatever, is that house got to stay there? They can't sell it or nothing like this. Can a stranger then buy that house if he wants to live there, or has that got to stay as a farm property?
Well, we do sell surplus, well, let them sell surplus farm residences, but I don't think that really covers under that. But anyway, I don't know whether you want to get into that technical part, Brian, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's the second part to the mortgage piece at the front end is if it's not on a separate parcel, you wouldn't be able to sell it. So it would always be part of that. I mean, theoretically, I guess, you could rent it out, something like that, but you wouldn't be able to sell it, no. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Fox?
Maybe just something more of a portable idea.
Well, they do have bunkhouses, I guess what they call them, or, whatever, in some farms. And I think, Doug, you might have had them when you had all the Jamaican workers here working in your orchards and stuff. Yep.
Well, I mean, a double wide trailer they make them pretty great, anyway, just knocking around ideas.
Yep. Any more comment, Brian, or do you think it's pretty much covered?
Yeah, no, I think I think there's opportunities, whether it's temporary type accommodation or building a second dwelling or an accessory dwelling. There's multiple ways that a farm operator can put another residential building on their property. It's just that issue of separating it through severance has always been the issue. But as I say, there's potentially ways around that if the provincial policy changed.
Okay, well, I think we've battered that one around for the time being anyway, unless there's some changes come up. But there are some considerations, and you have to understand them, I guess, because of the way things are evolving and what have you. And there's pluses and minuses, that's for sure. I think, Andrea, you said that, Brian, you had something you wanted to discuss or bring forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention OFA has had a survey, it closes today, unfortunately, on Farmgate marketing. And then along with that, there's perhaps half a dozen training sessions over the next period of time talking about the ins and outs and the implications and the things you need to know to set up a local farm stand. So anybody that is interested in doing that sort of thing ought to somehow find out about those training initiatives. They're free, of course. The starting place would be to go to the OFA website and see if you could find them. Probably the very last option would be to talk to me and see if I could find them for you. An intermediate step might be to talk to the member services representative, Reese Walt, and I'm sure she could steer you in the right direction if you wanted to participate in those training sessions on Farmgate marketing.
Okay, any questions in that regard? Okay, thanks very much for the information. Anything new from the OFA that we should be up to speed on, or?
I have a couple of notes here I could talk about
Okay.
if you want me to talk now. Northumberland Federation had a very successful poly-ag tour again this year. I have to give credit to the committee. Every year I think, wow, how are we going to top this next year? And I think they did again this year. We went to 3 spots, Ferguson's Farmers Market north of Port Hope, and there's a lesson in each one of these. That fellow talked about how far over budget he went when he was building his facility because of the unexpected permits and studies that he needed to do to build his roadside stand. A couple of them that stand out in mind was he had to do a traffic study, and when he presented the information to the county, I think was the municipality that had jurisdiction there, they said, well, that makes sense because it's exactly the same numbers that the guy down the road gave us last year when he did his traffic study. So you wonder why you need 2 traffic studies for the same location. And the other, not the same location, but very close together. And the other one was a water study to show that the water from the county road wouldn't, the other way around. The water from his property wouldn't run onto the county road, and he told us this as we're standing looking up at the county road, and there's just no way that the water's going to run up there. So, that was one of his comments, was these unnecessary studies and requirements and hurdles that he had to jump through to be able to build his facility. Another one was a Christmas tree farm that had been in business since 26 acres, and this is the third generation that has earned their living from 26 acres of Christmas trees. I didn't know you could earn a living from 26 acres of Christmas trees, but they are doing it. They've branched into the agritourism and that sort of thing, but one of the issues there was non-farm neighbors buying property around it and letting it rewild, letting the weeds grow that are blowing onto his Christmas tree farm. So that was one of the issues that he talked about there. And that issue comes up in Prince Edward County, where a lot of farms are being purchased by out-of-town people, and they're letting the weeds grow up, and then it becomes an issue of who has jurisdiction, the municipality or the Provincial Noxious Weed Act, and they get into all that kind of stuff. And I hear this when I go to Prince Edward County to the Federation down there. And the third stop was very interesting, the Dancing Bee, and right in Port Hope, I think. And all things beekeeping, this guy has it. It would remind you of walking into something like a Home Depot with the pallet racking, and that's the type of facility he has. And what was interesting was if he needs, he even packages honey and supplies that sort of thing to the bee industry. But, something like labels, you need labels to go on the jar of honey. So he set somebody up in their own business to print labels, which was kind of a really, rather than hire that person, he sets them up in their own business to do that job, which was pretty neat. But he had some restrictions there on the size of building that he could put on the lot. So he had his building, but then he had a whole bunch of sea cans outside to get extra storage simply because he couldn't build a bigger building on his lot. That completes the tour, and I just want to talk briefly about another initiative here in Northumberland County. Myself and our member services representative are working together, potentially accessing some skills development funding to train local abattoirs. MPP Pacini on several occasions has mentioned to me that there's money available for skills development. And way last spring, I guess, the OFA board toured the abattoir training facility at the University of Guelph. And it's state-of-the-art, brand new. They're offering training, not the uptake that they wish that they had. So we put our heads together and came up with this idea that maybe we could offer this training locally. And we're doing this in the 4 counties, Northumberland, Hastings, Prince Edward, and Leadington, Addington. And we're having an introductory Zoom meeting tomorrow night. So we've sent the invitations out to all the local abattoirs and all the local OFA members, should anybody be interested. So tomorrow night is going to be the time where we talk about the program and really decide what training is necessary, if there's a need, and if we go forward with it. And if we do go forward with it, we'll be applying for the funding and potentially running a training program. And other than seeing a few familiar faces at AMO, it was OFA had a booth at AMO, and I think I really enjoyed it, talked to a lot of people. There was always people coming by the booth to talk about all things agriculture. Yeah, it was good to see local people there.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Could I just,
Local or local?
Local yokels.
maybe I could put just a plug in for the Farmtown Park in Sterling. I was there earlier in the season.
It's just outside Quinte West.
Yes, but apparently most of the board is Quinte West people, so I think it qualifies. So anyway, I was there on Quinte West Day earlier in the season. As the OFA director, I get these invitations, and I try to go to as many of them as I can. And it was Quinte West Day, and they're very appreciative of the funding and support they get from Quinte West. I shouldn't say funding, but at least support. And funding. Okay, funding. And I was back there this past weekend where they had an induction ceremony for a couple of well-deserving farmers that were inducted into the Agricultural Hall of Fame. And I'm continually impressed by just the facility, the work that has gone into making that place what it is. And it's well worth the time to drive back and see it, even though it is just a little bit outside of Quinte West.
Okay, thank you. And we did attend, and we have a fellow here that has a tractor displayed back there, so.
Won't start.
It's a static display, I thought.
That's why.
That's right, that's right, the static display, no, I'm just.
No, it is really informative place, and you get to see a lot of antiques and the way farming had been done, and it's interesting.
It was good. I was there on Sunday as well, and Bruce Stewart was,
Okay.
no, sorry.
Peter.
Bruce Stewart's on a holiday in the East Coast. Peter Stewart was inducted into the Wall of Fame for, the amount of work he's done in agriculture as well as in, not just his own farm, but other parts of the province working to help improve agriculture. So it was good. It was really good.
Anyone else have anything they want to?
No, I just want to follow up
Okay.
on a couple
Go
of
ahead.
things that Brian has just mentioned. Local abattoir, and, you may go into training. I don't know, the problem you've got is for any of us, you've got to, if you're going to start an abattoir, you've got to have the facility, and you've got to have all the refrigeration, and you've got to have a place where you can house those animals, usually overnight, and be ready to deal with them the next day. And that's a big part of I know you're saying abattoir training, and the second part, of course, is you got to be able to sharpen a knife. And that's a skill not too many have, sharpening the knife. And I've I've processed a lot of them in my lifetime. So, but you got to make sure. And now you can't do any at home. It's got to go someplace to be inspected. I think it's between $300 and $500 to take an animal from your place. If you slaughter it at home, and then you load it on a trailer and all the requirements and what you have to do to get it someplace to be inspected before anything else can be done with it. So, anyway.
Okay. Mr. Keating, you said you had your hand up there earlier?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things I guess I missed when you went past, but the corner of Hearns Road and Crow Road, that brush is still there. So I just wondered if there was anything going on about that, like type of thing.
Well, we can pass along to the Public Works Director and the Supervisor of Roads and see if it's in the schedule for this fall. I know they do quite a bit in the fall, ditching and brushing, so we can pass it along, that's for sure.
Okay, and I don't know how to say it, but counselors there's no counselors on this committee from Sydney Ward. I was just wondering, with Sydney Ward being as agricultural as anybody, or maybe more, I just wondered if the next time a committee is set up, if there couldn't be some counselors out of Sydney Ward, like type of thing.
Sure. Yep. But normally people sign up for what committees they want to be on, and
Yeah.
then sometimes they just get appointed to, or delegated, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, it should be, I think Sydney Ward should have some, and like you say, if they delegate rather than ask, maybe, I don't know. So I would like to see some,
Sure.
one or two counselors off of Sydney Ward. That
Okay.
coming.
Yeah, we can look
We
into it.
all would.
Yeah.
We all share the same feeling, but, if you're not interested in it, or it's not something you feel you can contribute to, then why would you want to join it? That's the problem. No one's name from Sydney was ignored.
Well, it's hard to find anybody anybody now on council, like Murray Ward is well blessed with, farming experience, like everything. I know I look at, Sydney Ward, and, there's not too many that knows which end of the tail belongs on a cow. So, I just, that's just what my experiences are, not experience. My concern is if they're there, we can holler at them and they'll at least maybe pay attention. But thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I know Ms. Grills, when she's here, she's certainly a good spokesperson and represents the OFA from that end, Hastings and whatever, but I know she's not afraid to talk about farming issues in that area, so, yeah. But, we don't have too many I'd say Sydney councillors that are from an agricultural background. We lost Ron Hamilton a few years ago and what have you, and of course he was an active farmer too, but there's not too many active farmers left on council, so they're a dying breed. Anyway, thank you for your input. Anybody else down this way got anything they want to bring forward or questions? Okay, anybody up this way?
Doug Cruz.
Oh, Doug?
Just coming up to the microphone there.
This thing, okay.
Okay.
You can all have a good laugh regarding the ditching that's going along the side of the road out where I live. I went by one day and that looked like pretty good. I'm looking for fill. That was a mistake. You pay for what you get. I didn't have to pay. They dumped a truckload there, and I've been pulling stuff out of it ever since, trying to make topsoil out of it. Anyway, everybody learns. And they're doing a good job of ditching.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else down that way? Okay, Mr. Mayor, and I'll come from your way down. Anything you want to bring forward or discuss?
I think I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Fox, anything else? Councilor McHugh? I'm just going to mention two things. I was thought about these last night and this morning, things that are happening in our area. One thing that's happening down east of us, and I gave the mayor a copy of a farm publication. I don't know who else would get it. Eastern Ontario Agri News. It comes out of Chesterville, Winchester area. I don't know if you get it, Brian or Doug. But anyway, as you'll see in there, I think it was in the August edition, 3 eastern conservation areas get slapped. What they are doing down there is entertaining a redesignation of a lot of the so-called unevaluated wetlands and forested areas and farmland and whatever, and they were putting the freeze on a lot of properties that were ongoing operations. There was one, and I know the mayor and I talked about it, the one gentleman there, he wanted to refurbish his sugar shack and sap business, and they put a freeze on it and said they weren't going to allow him to do it anymore. And it was a well-established sugar bush and quite a big operation. But anyway, there was that and a few other farming areas that they were putting the freeze on, and anyway, the government has stepped in and told them to stop. So I have brought it up a couple times, as I said on Lower Trent. I thought if Rhonda was here today, she could discuss it. But since it's reared its head back in June, and then again in August, she has said that up here we've already established most of the areas, and then they review all the unevaluated wetlands, which we have to deal with in every application pretty much. But they have never done any of that down there. And then when they set out to do it, it was such an involved process on not just farmland, but people with rural land, and that it just literally was putting the freeze on everything pretty much. That even looked like a depression in the ground or whatever. And so it caused a lot of friction. And so where this is going to play out down the road, whether they let them relook at it or not, I just make you aware of it. There's been articles in the farm papers on this. And I know we still, and I do have a problem with some of their, and I think Brian, you and I have talked about it, and our planning staff, their interpretation of a wetland. PSWs we have no problem with, but this unevaluated wetland, it looks like it's every little depression or a mud puddle, that's an exaggeration that can be suggested that could be a wetland. And it's up to their interpretation, and our planning department and everything, we have to deal with it. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Is ongoing, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I can tell you that the Ottawa Valley has never been great. All the landowners and farmers have never been great lovers of conservation down there. There's always friction. Not that we don't have our share of it here with some of the things. But anyway, that's what's ongoing, and I know I left the publication so the mayor could see it. I don't subscribe to it, but they drop it off in the mailbox, and it's quite a good paper, along with a couple other ones I get too. But anyway, Councillor Cart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you're aware, what is the appeal process if you are the owner of some property that gets one of those unfortunate designations, short of the province intervening? I mean, is there any recourse, any appeal process for that sort of thing?
Well, certainly you can bring it to the board, and we can have a hearing on it. But the other thing is, I think usually what they do when there's an application, they'll ask for an EIS, an environmental impact study, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. And usually the applicant has to hire a consulting firm and try to, I guess, counter their claims or whatever, and then also do an assessment of the property, what it has or it doesn't have, and maybe argue, I guess, against what they see and what the applicant and the owner sees. So but you can bring it to the board, and we have had hearings on some of the things, on some of them, but.
Sounds like with great stress, time, and financial cost, though. Sounds
What
like,
is?
yeah.
Well, I think, what do they start at, Brian? 3,000 and upwards for some of these AIS? I guess according to the amount of land they have to look at, but they're not cheap. I can think of one we dealt with here a while ago that they, as far as I'm concerned, Quinte Conservation put the owners through hell, was on Fish and Game Club Road, the one down there. I know our committee passed it, and but they went through 2 different studies, and every time they come up with something, the Conservation Authority wouldn't accept it. You missed this, or you didn't do this or that. And it comes down, you were talking about farms growing up to scrub, Brian, earlier, and in this case, some of the field, there was a stream at the end, but they had lots of setback and everything, and a building envelope. But there was a portion of it that they didn't farm anymore, didn't cut hay, and it grew up to goldenrod and scrub and whatever, and they considered that was a wetland. That's where it started. And I can give you'll probably remember when we get down, because it had to go through rezoning and everything. And but anyway, there's other ones too we've had to deal with, and I sitting on committee of adjustment, I see the comments sometimes, and some of them when they're coming in, and some of it I think is justified, and others I think is a little over the top. But that's my personal opinion. But I don't know whether you were going to comment on any of it or not, but you guys deal with it more than we do up front when people come in and inquire. So
Yeah, I mean, again, that's another piece where as you know, the landscape has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and it doesn't necessarily change the piece that you're referring to there in terms of wetland evaluations. But up until recently, as you know, the scope of the Conservation Authority's regulations went beyond wetland facilities into other natural features, which is not the case anymore. So there is definitely, through changes in the provincial legislation, there's going to be more and more reliance on the findings of a private consultant that won't necessarily get challenged. Wetlands is still going to be under review because it will still need permits from Conservation Authority, but there's far more, if you like, trust and reliance on the outcomes of a private consultant who's brought on by the applicant to do a study than we saw in the past. But definitely, Conservation Authority are going to review. If it falls within their regulations, specifically for wetlands, they're going to review that study, and they're going to make comments whether they support it or not. And we all know when you ever get two professionals, 2 engineers, 2 planners, 2 environmental consultants together in a room, they're probably not going to agree on most of the things. There's always differences of opinion, so that leads to sometimes to a stretched out process. Definitely, yeah.
And one of the things I found lately, and I don't mean to condemn the staff out there or Quinte Conservation, but getting back to what Brian said, I see farms that I know around me that were productive farms and clear. They go out there now and see a bunch of scrub brush, poplar trees and red cedar, whatever, which grows up within 2 years. And they think that's somewhat virgin land, I guess, or it's never been developed. And then it gets a different view taken of it. That's the part that kind of bugs me. I see some land around us that was farmed, and you know where I am. We're talking just across the border down from us in Prince Edward County. But I have my great-great-grandfather's farm next to me that's a trailer park now. I look at it and it's forested with trees, but I can tell you they're not oak or maple or anything like that. And there was a small orchard there, and they were all work fields from one end to the other. Now it's covered with trees. And when they go out and look at that, well, they take a different view of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's like when you was talking about good farmland growing up. Again, the last 2 or 3 years, there's been, no, in the Frankfurt area, that's rented out, they're paying rent on the land, but they're not working it. I don't understand why they want to hold it for like type of thing. This is what I don't understand is there's over 100 acres, 2 or 3 different properties, but they it's not being farmed, but yet there's a guy renting them, and not just the same guy either, but a lot of land is that could be in agriculture is just being left for the simple reason that the guy that rents it can't do it. He's got too much land to work because the single person is it's either too small or they're getting too many acres to work by themselves, and it's too small to hire help. And this is where I don't know, there's no answer. You can't tell somebody they gotta grow something on it, that's for sure, but that's kind of my view is, why is people renting land that they can't work, or can't afford, just ain't got the time to do it, like type of thing. That's what I don't know.
Well, a lot of them are buying the properties and setting on them too, and they're out of area proprietors, I'll put it that way. But the other thing with this, some of the farms are being abandoned, and then a farm does take it over, then they're going after the farmer for clearing the land, bringing it back into production. And so, anyway, it's an interpretation on their side, and then I guess the people that are out there that are have been previous experience or previous knowledge of what things look like, and that's what's frustrating, I think, with a lot of people. But I know I don't want to prolong this meeting. We weren't going to be here too long, but anyway, the other thing I wanted to bring up, which I think is an asset to this area, and it's a bit contentious, there has been in Prince Edward County, is the announcement of the new grain terminal at Picton Terminals. I know, Brian, you live in Wellington, but Councillor McHugh and I, we get a copy of the Picton paper in our mailbox every week, and we've been reading about it. But of course, Heimbecker and Parish, which has the big elevators to the north of us here, they're going to build a big shipping port there for to ship grain, which is great, because now the truckers won't have to go to Prescott or Hamilton or Oshawa, and it'll save on fuel and the environment, I guess, and it gives it a closer place for people to ship out, because it's a good deep water port. It's where they used to ship the iron ore out from Marmora when it was in operation a number of years ago. So I know there's a lot of controversy down there on it, and they're saying there's going to be, I don't know what all going on there over and above that, but I think for the farming community, it's a great asset, and there's been some great, I guess, I know you've been reading all the comments in the letter to the editor. There was,
I didn't write it.
but I know a certain person from the head of the Grain Farmers of Ontario had sent a letter of support, certainly Peter Archer, and then there was a nice letter to the editor last week's paper from Tim Beattie, who has Beattie Seeds and also owns County Farm Supply, and that supporting it and whatever, and Lloyd Crow, who's the Reynolds Brothers big farm operation down there. But anyway, it's I don't know whether it's all the new people coming in down there, Brian, that wants everything stopped or what, but it just seemed like there was one thing after the other. They didn't want that to happen. So anyway, that's the only other thing I was going to announce that I think has helped our farming community here, especially the producers. Yep. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I could just comment on that as well. Excuse me. The Prince Edward Federation of Agriculture is definitely supportive of that, as are the farmers in the county, and they're hoping that they can figure out a way to let that port go through and let it start shipping grain again, or not again, but shipping grain.
Did you want to make a comment on any of that, Brian? Or?
No, I certainly won't make a comment specific to that. But I think the point is that is relevant to this committee and to the work that we do is just that issue when you get competing land uses which clash, right? And I don't need to tell anybody on this committee that agriculture can be a dirty, smelly business, and when you start to then have competing interests in your area for residential uses, recreational uses, tourism, that type of thing, you're going to get that clash on some of the issues, some of the resulting issues from agricultural use, particularly high intensity agricultural use. But that's why committees like this and in the planning system, exists to try as best as we can mediate some of those clashes of interest, if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have anything they want to bring forward at this time? If not, we'll get through the rest of this here. Delegations, we have none. Staff reports and decision items, I didn't see any presented. If I'm wrong, Andrea, don't be afraid to give me a whack in the head. Remind me. Correspondence for decision, we'll certainly we'll pass along, as far as correspondence, we'll pass along about your concerns about the brush there, and to Chris, I'm sure Andrea will take a note of that, and so it's in the minutes, and then it can be
Thanks a lot, Mr. Chairman.
okay. And supplementary items, we had none at this time. Any notices of motion? No, it's none seen. And any other business? I guess we kind of done that under presentations. And other than the new business, they said on Federation Agricultural FA survey, and I know I filled that out. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute? I didn't know if there's anything more you want to add to that. Are there going to be results passed along? How are they going to do with that, I would say?
Well, I can get back to you on that one.
Okay. Oh, we'll stay tuned then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. If there's no other bit of forward business, I guess we come to the big decision item at the end. Motion to adjourn. Mayor Harrison, Councillor McHugh. All in favor or all opposed? All carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your attendance, and staff.